Thanks for staying with us. You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Well, for a bit more on the UK elections, here is our special correspondent, John Cookson, in London.
Well, it's just sort of sinking in. It's very much the morning after the night before feeling in the UK at the moment. The massive win by the Labour Party and Keir Starmer, and many congratulations are heading his way as he settles into number 10 Downing Street tonight, consulting with colleagues, appointing people to the cabinet. He'll no doubt be receiving calls from world leaders as well, possibly from Joe Biden and European leaders. Keir Starmer is very much a pro-European politician, so I'm sure he'll be getting calls from capitals like Brussels tonight offering their congratulations. The figures are stunning, really. 650 seats in Parliament, 326 for a majority. Labour tonight on 412, a massive majority of about 170. The Conservatives slumped at 121. That's their worst result since the Conservative Party was created back in 1832. Reform Party on 4 and Lib Dems on 71. So you can see by those figures what an absolute rout of the Conservative administration has happened overnight in voting. Interesting to point out that the share that Labour got overnight was no bigger than the general election in 2019. What's happened here is that, of course, people have voted to oust the Conservatives by any means, and millions of votes have of course gone to Labour, but it's also gone to the smaller parties like Reform and the Lib Dems. So a massive political earthquake happened overnight here in the UK. Things are just starting to sink in, as I say. Cabinet ministers already being appointed. Yvette Cooper as Home Secretary. Rachel Reeves, Charles, the first female Chancellor in Britain in 1,000 years. Incredible. David Lammy, Foreign Secretary, Angela Rayner, Deputy Prime Minister. More appointments will be made in the coming days. The first cabinet meeting probably on Monday. So a dynamic story. Things still evolving tonight here, but certainly change has happened in a big way in this country. Charles. Yeah, it doesn't help the smaller parties like Reform. Lib Dems doing very well. This first past the post system is said by British constitutionalists to be the strongest method of government. It means there are 2 major or even 3 major parties in Parliament as a result. Compare that, for example, with Europe, where coalition governments are quite common, and for example in Germany, the coalition government there traditionally weak. So there are points in favour and against, but it's certainly a British tradition to stick with first past the post. As you say, though, it does throw up some strange results sometimes. Everyone says, everyone in the Labour Party that is, I'm getting echo back at the moment, MCR, if you could stop that. Everyone says that he's a decent man and has always been a Labour activist since his early teens. He went to university in Leeds and got a law degree. Fast forward a number of years and he became Director of Public Prosecutions here in the UK. He first became a MP in 2015 and then led the party from 2019 onwards. During that time he's purged the party of the hard left element and also.
All right, there's a new sheriff in town as long as British politics is concerned after Sir Keir Starmer was on Friday appointed Prime Minister by King Charles III, having led the Labour Party to a resounding victory over the Conservatives in parliamentary election. For the significance of this substantial shift in that country's balance of power, especially against the backdrop of the rapidly changing dynamics of global politics, we're now being joined by Chude, who's an entrepreneur, writer, novelist, civil society activist, media professional, and development expert, an international affairs analyst. Good morning, Achike. Good to have you join us on the morning show today.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, let's talk Britain. Let's talk British politics. There's a new sheriff in town. Sir Keir Starmer is the new prime minister. Everything happened in 24 hours, 48 hours. He's become prime minister. By Monday, the first cabinet meeting will hold. What are your thoughts on what Britain was able to achieve with this election, and what are the key takeaways, particularly for a country like Nigeria, given the relationship that we have with Britain? What are the key takeaways that you think should be of interest to us here?
Well, I think the major one is the fact that people are supposed to be involved in the politics of their country, because it has implications for them. Obviously, we are talking about a democratic setting, in the United Kingdom, where the people say, with regards to the direction their government has gone or is going, is best articulated during an election, a moment such as this, where they have to pass a vote of confidence on what they have lived through in the past few years, or to outrightly reject their lived experience for that period of time. And so this is what they have done, and they have spoken loudly in a way that precipitated an earthquake, a catastrophe, for the Conservatives. But again, an indication, which was again acknowledged by Rishi Sunak when he was departing, that the people have spoken. And so there is respect for the voices of the people in the electoral process. And I think this is what we actually need. Every government, especially under a democratic setting, has duties and obligations. And these duties and obligations have been spelled out by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The primary purpose of governance is the welfare of the people and the security of the people. And so when a government fails to live up to that responsibility, then there must be a process, free and fair process, a process that would allow the people to articulate their distaste and grievances, or their love for what they have gone through in the past few years. And that can only be articulated through the electoral process. So that process has to be efficient. That process has to be, essentially free and fair. And nobody is saying that every day is a process, a human process that must be perfect. But we are talking about, some degrees of efficiency, workability that would, ultimately at the end of the day, when people look at it, when they go back and they look at it, they know that either they went through a process that was healthy or a process that was unwholesome. And it is good for the sustenance of democracy that people always have a belief that they have contributed to their democracy, through the electoral process. And I think that is a lesson, to be learned. And another one is, you can see the dispatch or the, immediacy with which this election was conducted, results determined almost immediately. And of course, people had an idea about how devastating, how impactful this election was going to be, negatively impactful, that is, for the Conservatives. They already had that idea. And so it says something about polling, and to some extent, the accuracy of polling, which is to a very large extent, scientific. And we have also seen the immediacy of action on the part of the outgone Prime Minister, who comes and says, look, we acknowledge our defeat. We know that in spite of the bitterness of the electoral, electoral combat, but the man, Keir Starmer, is a good man. He spoke about him in glowing terms, and then also acknowledged the fact that they let their people down, and he took responsibility for the failure of the party. And obviously, with this kind of a massive defeat, he is not expected to remain as Prime Minister. I think if he has not resigned, he'll be resigning in the next, not as leader of the party. If he has not resigned, he'll be resigning in the next, few days. And so that's the beauty of their democracy. And then we have also seen how when you talk about hitting the ground running, which is a balance that we have in this country, we are going to hit the ground running. Everybody, I mean, Nigerians have fallen in love with it, and government officials, when they win, they go hit the ground running. They hit the ground running in appointment of prime ministers in Nigeria 3 months, 6 months after they have come to power. We have seen how it is done in a country that is serious, that realizes the fact that we have a lot of things to do. Within days, within hours, already people are being appointed to fill posts. So I think that these are very important lessons to learn in Nigeria.
Well, one of the significant challenges for the Labour Party, of course, now that they are in power, will be restoring underfunded public services. Bill mentioned that Labour has a big growth plan that includes liberalising planning to facilitate infrastructure development. Now, how feasible do you think that this plan is in the British current economic climate? And where do you think Labour will source the necessary funding for these ambitious projects?
Yeah, I think Stekama, Starmer said, described his government as a government that would, that will run a government of service. Because for him, millions of people, slid into insecurity. Of course, he was talking about economic insecurity. And then he also described the world as a volatile place, also giving an idea of the fact that Britain has to engage internationally. But with regards to liberalization of, the planning has always been a very big issue with, in the United Kingdom, with the kind of bureaucracy they have. In fact, I think a business person, a development person was talking recently, I think in the wake of this election, while talking about the need to reform, planning, he said that there was a development project that they were involved in that took that whose lifespan, that's the lifespan of the project itself, took about 80% of the lifespan of the project was in planning, while 20% was committed to the development of the actual project itself. So that gives you an idea of the nightmare that it has become, and that's why a lot of things, have not, are left undone. And again, it is perhaps part of the reason why the United Kingdom has the lowest rates of investment and the weakest productivity among the the big economies in the world. So these are part of the issues and that they have to also look at. And then you talked about the very serious problems in public services and the inefficiency. And I think number one on the scale is the issue of the NHS. In fact, the man that has been appointed that is in charge of the health, the health sector, was saying recently that their byline, their word or their policy statement should be that the NHS is broken, and therefore they have to concentrate on what they are going to do about the NHS, and has initiated moves immediately to begin to discuss with junior doctors that have been have had issues in industrial disharmony essentially in the UK for over a year now. And of course, that has ensured that patients who should be receiving medical attention have been on the waiting list to the tune of millions. And so these are part of the problems of the NHS. Cost has become exceedingly very, very high and prohibitive. And so it's a challenge. Whether they are able to meet up with these challenges, I think it's something that a lot of people are not sure of. Keir Starmer has also talked about building 1.5 million houses. People don't know how that is going to happen because in recent years, the highest number of housing units that have been built has been about 150-something thousand. So how you're going to deliver on 1.5 billion housing units in the next few years, I think is something that has befuddled a lot of people. But perhaps they have a plan on that. There are factories to be built. Of course, we know what is happening for a very, very long time. Countries in Europe decided to move production, began to play down on productive activities, and decided to ship out companies, and some of these products and production to China. And China has now become a very big, perhaps the biggest, or in fact the biggest, manufacturing place in the world. And that has also stunted the growth of industries in places like Britain. So these are, I think, some of the challenges that face the Labour Party. Data centers also, they are lacking in that, and then the laboratories and other for research. So these are challenges, and that they just have to try to meet up with.
All right, Chude, the media is reporting that there are between 4 and 6, some are saying 4, some are saying 6, British Nigerians or Nigerian, British politicians who have won parliamentary elections in the UK, which of course speaks to diversity, speaks to inclusion, and of course everybody's celebrating that. As a matter of fact, a Yoruba party was formed and allowed to partake in that election, as a young political party. And that party, by the way, garnered about 261 votes. Yes, he didn't get any representative elected, but he got 261 votes. Of course, that even in America, Nigerians have been acknowledged as being part of why certain elections went in a particular way in many states, in Georgia, and a few other places. But here in Nigeria, many people celebrate inclusion and diversity that we are witnessing in the British politics and the American politics tend to play right-wing politics here. You hear things about state of origin, why certain people shouldn't be allowed to determine how politics goes in certain states in Nigeria. And you begin to wonder if the things that we celebrate abroad are not necessarily, what obtains here. What are your thoughts on that sort of a thing? People say, no, it's about our people in Nigeria, but then when they go out, they want to be part of the political space abroad. Isn't that rather befuddling?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not so sure that it's right wing from that perspective. When you talk about the left and then the right in Europe, for instance, I think we have an idea of what they are essentially. But I agree with you, really, absolutely. The kind of parochial politics, that we play, politics of exclusion in this country that is being driven contrary to the spirit and letter of the Nigerian Constitution. So what we see really in terms of the game that is played in this country, the game of the politics of division that is brought about by ethnic jingoists, and politicians who do not have any message of hope to the people and substance. And so what they do always is to rather divide the people along these parochial sentiments of, tribalism, ethnic irredentism, geopolitics, and their religious schisms. And that's what they have always done to be able to maintain power. But we know that this is a smokescreen because you see how they relate among themselves. You see these discriminations that they try to create within the body politic of this country and keep our people divided. Is not the kind of politics they play among themselves. Because for themselves, it's about politics of inclusion when it comes to the issue of Nigeria's commonwealth, sharing the resources of our country. Then you know that there is no division among the political class. And so it's what we need to keep on preaching to them, begging them to rise above this mediocrity, to rise above this parochialism, to look at the bigger picture of 220 million lives that they could impact upon positively. Of course, there are good people within the political spectrum in this country, but it would appear that somehow they have allowed those with a very, dubious mentality to influence the polity more than even the good ones are doing. So the good ones need to rise up whenever these things rear their head. And of course, you have talked about the achievements of Nigerians outside the shores of this country. You did mention, I'm sure it's in your mind, Kemi Badenoch, who almost became or was on the verge or the cusp of becoming Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And then right now, she is poised. I think she's in the front, she's among the front runners for the position of the leadership, of leader of the Conservative Party. Now, that is what diversity, positive diversity, brings to the table. And we have seen Nigerians flourishing outside the shores of this country. But I know that they want to come back here and also flourish in their own country, because there is no place like home. No matter how long they stay in those places, you know, one or two things would always remind them that this is not their place, that they have their roots in Nigeria, a country that is destined to, even though we have not lived up to that, but a country that is destined to lead the rest of Africa. Once Nigeria can wake up, Africa will truly wake up. Everybody knows that, because we have all it takes. We have the human resources, we have, you know, the natural resources, and we have people who can actually, who are capable of getting these things done. But unfortunately, what we have always had are the wrong people, you know, in the right places, you know, at the right time or the wrong time. But ultimately, what we see as an outcome of their engagement within the polity and negativities. And we just simply cannot continue. Where we are in where we are today is, I would say, we need to up the game. We cannot continue, you know, to live in the past. We are operating in the 21st century, and we must bring 21st century thinking into the mix as we try and strive to make our country better. A lot has to do with the quality of leadership that we have, and then again the quality of followership, because of course the leaders come from us. And then even when they are not behaving themselves, the people are also expected to act in ways that show their displeasure with the political leadership, and to also show that they are willing at any particular point in time to change that leadership. But then again, the process itself needs to be fair and free, and so that the people will be able to exercise this choice whenever it is placed before them.
Chude, we want to thank you for joining us on the morning show today. I mean, it would have been nice to hear your thoughts about how what happened in Britain will galvanize those who are calling for the return to parliamentary democracy in Nigeria, how it will boost, you know, the advocacy. But we haven't got time to proceed further. I'm sure there will be other opportunities. I'm sure there will be other opportunities for this discussion. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Achuke Chude.